G'day and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking formation selection for your game week 1 squad. Now there's valid formations in the game that allow 4 at the back, 3 at the back or 5 at the back. Variations of 3 in the midfield, 4 in the midfield or 5 in the midfield, and 1 up front, 2 up front and 3 up front. Now what it really boils down to is how you like to structure your bench and the risk you like to carry into each game week, depending on what kind of players you have on your bench. So what I've got on screen here is a formation with a 4-4-2, so playing 2 up front. We've got Raya in goal. We've got a back 4 starting of Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, James and Perisic, so a very strong back 4. A midfield 4 of Salah, some 8 million player, so Luis Diaz is in there at the minute. A 7 million player, so we've got Coutinho in there at the minute, because they've got two very good first games. And then a 6 million player in Martinelli. Now that could be Gallagher, or there's a whole bunch of 6 million options out there, and even Neto comes in at 5.5 if you want to play him as your starting player. And the 2 up front that I've put in is Haaland, because he'll probably be in a lot of teams. At the moment he's selected by 65% of the games. It's likely he's going to be one of the top contenders for game week 1. And I've slotted in a 7 million Tony. Now the reason I've put in a 7 million Tony is typically in a 4-4-2 you'll probably have about a 7 million option up front, so that you can cover your bases. Like a Watkins, I think, is about 7. He might be 7.5, but he's in and around those prices. But also to show you what a promoted 6 million striker can achieve in a season. So Tony started at 6 million last season, and he scored 139 points across the whole season. So actually not too bad. That's an okay score for a full season, especially for a player from a promoted team, no matter what position they play in. 140 points, pretty decent. And then on my bench, I've gone a 4 million defender, which is typically either a burnt spot or a 4 million option that emerges in the game as a starting player. This year it looks like it's going to be Nico Williams from Liverpool. They're very close to finishing a deal with Nottingham Forest, and so Nico Williams will likely go to Nottingham Forest, probably start all the games there, and he's priced in the game at 4 million at the moment. So keep an eye on him. If he does go, then that's your starting 4 million option on your bench. Typically when you play 4 in the midfield, your 5th midfielder, your bench midfield option, is a 4.5 million player. That's roughly the price point. There's no one cheaper. You can't find a player cheaper than 4.5 million, so it's the cheapest you can get. And you want to find a 4.5 million player that's always playing, right? So Murphy seems to be the highest pick at the moment for Newcastle. Newcastle's obviously doing a lot of deals pre-season, so that'll probably change later. But typically your 4.5 million option just sits there as a player that comes off your bench when something happens to your starting squad. So maybe someone unfortunately gets injured in the warm-up, right? Deadline's passed, you had no idea this guy was going to be injured. He gets injured during the warm-up, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so someone's coming off your bench. So you always want players that are typically playing to come off your bench, and that's why finding a 4 million starting player turns out to be quite gold in a lot of strategies, or common strategies amongst FPL managers. Now the problem I see with 4-4-2 formation. Well, hold on, and I'll go to the last spot as well. So the last spot is typically just dead on your bench. It's a dead spot. Now in a 4-4-2 formation, this is your your third forward, and the cheapest forward you can find is 4.5 million. You will basically never find a 4.5 million striker that is starting in their respective teams. Last year the closest we got was Gelhardt from Leeds, who starting at the very end of last season. Bamford was obviously injured, and they had all sorts of things going on at Leeds with manager switches and whatnot. And so he came in at the end, was a great bench option at 4.5, because when he came off your bench, he was a striker playing at 4.5. Now, the big difference between... I've just chucked in Plange here. I don't know who he is, or what, he probably won't be playing for Crystal Palace at all for the season. And I don't expect any 4.5 million options will. So I've just put in a Crystal Palace player because it won't take up a spot in my starting 11. Like, you wouldn't want to put a 4.5 million Liverpool option on there that's never going to play, because then you can't have 3 Liverpool players in your starting lineup when you want to, because of the rules of the game. For those that you aren't aware, or should be aware, you can only have a maximum of 3 players from any one team in your team. This is also why I'm using this on-screen visual display, because Nico Williams is still a Liverpool player, and my current lineup already has 4 players in it, so I couldn't do that with the game, so I've used this on screen to show you. So the big difference that I've found between 4-4-2 and the next formation that I'm going to show you, which is my preferred formation at the moment of 4-5-1, is what happens when your bench players actually get activated throughout the season. So in this formation, let's just assume that 4 million option, even if it is Nico Williams playing at Nottingham Forest, whoever you put as bench option number 1 out of these 2 choices of Nico Williams or Murphy, when they come off their bench, is Nico Williams going to get a clean sheet for Nottingham Forest? Probably not. They're a promoted side. They're not going to keep many clean sheets throughout the season, so you're probably looking at 2 points off the bench. Maybe he gets an attacking return, but again, Nottingham Forest are not going to score many goals throughout the year, so you're looking at 2 points coming off your bench for that 4 million. So 4 million guaranteed starter, so he's definitely going to get his 2 points. He's got the possibility of getting a clean sheet, but the likelihood's pretty bloody low because it's Nottingham Forest. So you're likely going to be starting Murphy as your first bench option in this formation. Now, Murphy coming off the bench when someone gets injured or someone gets red carded, or a couple of injuries, and you can't spend the hits and you have to play your bench member that week. Murphy ain't going to get you more than 2 points most weeks. He might sneak in with 3 points for when he's on the field and they get a clean sheet if Newcastle defend well throughout the season. But you're really looking at a maximum of about 3 points off your bench when these players are called on, or when one of your other starting players has a bad match. So, for instance, in game week 2, in this choice of startup, I've got both James and Perisic who play each other. So Chelsea play Spurs in game week 2. Now, that's not ideal because they're both defenders. If they were both midfielders or attackers, I probably wouldn't care so much. But what I'm really saying here is I'm hoping for a 0-0 clean sheet. I want 2 clean sheets out of my players here, which is not good. So I might not want to play one of these players. I might favour the home side here and actually play James and bench Perisic, maybe. Which means I'd have to play Murphy. Now, Murphy's going to get 3 points against Brighton. Maybe a flicker goal, who knows, but probably not. So, in this setup, with a less risky bench, because you've got 2 playing bench members, those bench members are only totaling about 5 points coming off your bench, 2 and 3 respectively, roughly, right? So, if we switch over to a formation of 4-5-1, and I'll just read the team out. So I've kept exactly the same backline. So still Raya in goal with Trent, Cancelo, James and Perisic across the back. So it's still 4 in the backline. But this time we're playing with 5 starting midfielders. Now, in this setup, so both these teams, I should have mentioned, both cost 100 million. So it uses all your money in your bank. There's no money left over. This starts with 5 playing midfielders and only 1 up front. Now the risk here is I've got 2 bench members that are not going to be starting for their teams. So I've still got Plange as my Crystal Palace forward and forward spot 3, in substitute spots 3. So I will always kill that spot. I don't play with a full 3 bench because I like as much money on the pitch as I can possibly afford. And I don't particularly like strikers either because they only get 4 points per goal, whereas midfielders get 5 points for a goal and a clean sheet point when they score clean sheets. So I typically favour spending more money in midfield. My second striker here I've put in as Greenwood at 4.5. Again, he is not going to start. He got a total of, I think, 3 substitute appearances or 4 substitute appearances or something like that last season. Maybe 1 start when they got quite a few injuries. He only got 15 points for the whole of last year. So again, he is not going to play in this team. So the risk here is you've got 2 dead bench spots. However, my first bench spot I've put in as a 4.5 million playing Tomiyasu, who's playing for Arsenal. Now, Arsenal are a pretty good team. They will keep clean sheets throughout the season. Tomiyasu also has some attacking threat. Not much, but some, and pretty decent for 4.5. I think they've underpriced him. He should have been about 5 million because of the clean sheets they probably will keep and his attacking threat. So, he's a perfect first bench option because when said player gets either red carded or injured in the warm-up or, you know, they just got a horrific game, you can quite easily put Tomiyasu into your team and start him. So I might, for example, Perisic in game week 2, you might be benching him away to Chelsea and starting Tomiyasu at home to Leicester. Now, Leicester is a pretty attacking side, and I think in seasons past, Arsenal and Leicester have actually put on quite a show of football and scored quite a few goals, so probably not a great fixture for Tomiyasu in this instance. But throughout the season, or at least throughout the first 8 weeks, which is what we're planning for in game week 1, which is roughly when people start using wildcards, because they're forcing us to use a wildcard this year before the World Cup. Which is quite interesting. So the formation that you choose in game week 1 is actually not as important as it has been in previous seasons, because in previous seasons you didn't have to play that game, that wild card, and so you were planning to try. Well, you should be planning to try and hold your team for as long as you can, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, because it's a 38 game week season. You only have 2 wild cards, and so choosing your formation in game week 1 is actually very important because, as you can see in this formation, if you wanted to get Kane next to Haaland up front, you wanted two big hitters up front. It's actually it's a two trade move. So they have to bank a transfer throughout your game weeks to do it without costing you any hits, or you're going to have to spend the hits to do it. So I'm leaning towards 4-5-1, probably because of the influence of what happened last year. Big at the back was quite popular, but even more so this season in the way that they've priced the players. There is so much value in defense. Now, if I go back to the Tony example, right? So Tony's 7 million, but let's just assume that you're putting in one of the promoted strikers, probably Mitrovic, right, from Fulham, because he scored the most goals in the Championship. Now, he's played in the Premier League before, and he's not good. He's been tried and tested twice, I believe, and yeah, Mitrovic just can't keep up with the pace of Premier League, and neither can Fulham. Like, promoted sides typically struggle when they come up to the Premier League. Like, it's every year, I think at least one of the promoted teams always gets relegated. So typically 2, but at least 1. It's hardly ever they all survive. So it's something to keep in mind when you're actually looking at those cheap prices. But if you look at the pricing, right? So James is 6 million. Now Tony was 6 million last year, and Tony scored 137 points and James scored 141 points. Tony played all the games for Brentford. James didn't. He was injured for ages, and he still scored 140 points. And he's 6 million. It's the same price as your striker. He's going to pick up clean sheets. He's going to get 6 points for a goal when he scores, and he does shoot, and he will score goals. And he's an assist magnet. Like, he's always up front, blasting balls in and getting fantasy assists for rebounds, and he's got a wicked delivery on him too. So if you were going to choose between James as a season keeper, assuming he doesn't get injured, and Tony at 6 million, or Mitrovic, or whoever the other promoted strikers are, you got to really look at James and go, man, that's value. Like, this is the same price, and the points potential that he has got is just far and superior of Tony. And as you go across the board, unless you're reaching into the upper echelons of pricing for forwards in the 9 million vicinity, you're not going to find players that are going to match these totals. Watkins at 7 or 7.5, I should check. What is Watkins? Let's have a look. Watkins is coming at 7.5, and he only scored 131 points last year. You know, like, it's less than James, and James play. I don't even. How many minutes did he play, James? Let's have a quick look. James only played 1,863 minutes. That's half a season. It's like 3,300 minutes, 3,300 odd minutes for a full season. Yeah, double his points roughly, and he's like a 280 point player, best player in the game if you can remain fit. So that's why I am heavily in Perisic. Oh my god, I have not talked about Perisic yet. Yes, this is a formation thing, but by god, 5.5 million for a striker playing as a winger, but listed as a defender, playing for Spurs, so we're going to keep clean sheets anyway. What the bloody hell have they done? Like, they're broken us. Like, that's a broken price. Surely he's going to, like, once people pick up on this, he's going to be in every squad. So it's looking like already my locked-in players, for sure, who are not moving from my squad: Trent, Salah, and Cancelo. 100% not going anywhere. I've heard other managers saying that the only two dead certs in their team is Trent and Salah, and hey, fair enough. Those two players should be in everyone's team. It's just they've priced. Salah's okay at 13. He's a pretty good price, but you have to put him in. He's playing Fulham game week 1, so he's going to be in everyone's team. And Trent at 7.5 is again a broken price, so he's just going to be in everyone's team as well. So just set and forget, right? But Cancelo, he scored over 200 points last year. 200 points. He barely ever gets rotated in the City squad. He's always playing. He's always up front. He's shooting. He's assisting. He's getting clean sheets left, right, and centre. He's a Trent in disguise at 7 million. I mean, yeah, he doesn't take free kicks, and Trent does take free kicks, and that's potentially why they've put extra 0.5 million on top of Trent. But a 200 point player that's in a City squad that plays like City does for 7 million, he's not leaving my team. And if Perisic is starting for Spurs, yeah, he's a dead set in my team as well. I mean, come on, he's like James, just cheap. And that's already 3 of my defenders kind of locked in, if that's the way that the game plays out. So it's just kind of going to show that these defensive spots are very important. I might even start the season with 5 at the back. Now, what you will have noticed, and just to tidy up on the formation thing before we finish off, is this is a 100 million valued team. I could put a 4 million defending option on the bench, but then we run into the problem of basically having no bench, and Nico Williams coming off for Nottingham Forest of 2 points when called upon is possibly a risk too far because of the COVID situation. Last year I took so many hits because it was like I had a brand new almost a brand new team every week because of the COVID postponements and games getting cancelled left, right and centre, and it actually being it was viable to take hits to bring in new players that are actually playing a game when you realise games were being called off. So the bench build was very important last year. I don't know exactly what it's going to be like this year, but you'd assume that at the start of the season at least, very little injuries because everyone's had the summer off to rest and recuperate. pre-season they should be, leading in as as most pre-season should. It'll be intense, but not overly intense, so that they don't break their players. And the only possibilities that we might run into is their pre-season warm-up games where they may get injured. That's when we will also get a better handle on where these players are playing, whether or not they are likely to be starters in their teams. So Perisic will be very one to keep a close eye on. And to get a better idea of what kind of formation that you are more likely going to settle into. However, having had a broad look across the spectrum of prices that they've priced for defenders and midfielders, they're all pretty cheap. So there's so much value in defence and midfield, and those players get the most points for their fantasy returns anyway. So why you would put your money up front, I'm not sure. I don't see the point in it yet. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think about my strategy for how I choose my formation and the breakdown. Things I might have missed out, or things that potentially I've talked about that you were not aware of. If you did like the content, please do give us a like, and expect to see more content around here sometime soon. So hit that subscribe button so that you know when those videos are being released, and I'll catch you again soon.